Welcome to this week's episode of the Fit for the Kingdom podcast. Your host, Trent Holbert, and I'm really glad that you guys are joining me on this episode because I've got a very special guest on the show that I'm personally extremely intrigued to learn about. The subject matter is going to be phenomenal. This is going to be the first for the Fit for the Kingdom podcast, but it speaks so close to my heart. His name is Rabbi Yonatan Neril. He's coming from Jerusalem. This morning for me, I'm not sure what it is for him, but he's coming from the Holy City and going to sit with me on the show today and talk about his work. So Rabbi Neril is co-author of the Eco Bible, which relates to what the Bible says about ecology and creation care. As people face huge ecological challenges, including growing hurricanes, floods, forest fires, and plastic pollution, the groundbreaking Eco Bible dives into this question. Drawing on 3,500 years of religious ethics, it shows how the Bible itself and its great scholars embrace care for God's creation as a fundamental and living message. Eco Bible both informs the reader and inspires spiritual commitment and action to protect all of God's creation. You can tell just from reading that just how excited I am. And I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation. So let's do that. I'm going to welcome to the show Rabbi Neril. Welcome to the Fit for the Kingdom podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah. So when I got the invite or the request to be on the show, I got to tell you, man, as soon as I read it, I was like, get on this right away. This is the first for my show to have someone. I mean, I delve into the topic of creation care all the time, but I don't have an expert like you. I don't have someone I've never heard of that was actually doing the work from a biblical standpoint, or should we say, Torah standpoint.
Yes, well, it's great to be here with you.
So, how's things in Jerusalem right now? Warm, sunny, beautiful.
Today was a sunny day, and actually yesterday I had the good fortune of going on a hike with my son in the valley where David slew Goliath.
Oh my goodness,
Uh-huh.
sacred.
Yes, it was
I've
a
not,
beautiful
I've
hike.
not. See, I've gone all over the world, and the only holy place, scripturally speaking, that I've ever been was the Red Sea. And putting my feet into those waters there in Hurghada, Egypt, I was still on the wrong side. Had to get, the waters didn't part when I put my feet in, so I wasn't going too far. But it was quite sacred just to be in that area. I hope one day for myself to make a pilgrimage over to the Holy Land and just tour that and take that all in. So it must be quite a blessing for you to live there. Have you always been in Israel?
I feel very blessed to live here. I've lived here for the past 18 years, and I grew up in California. So I left California when I was 22, and I've been here for most of my adult life, and my wife and I are blessed to raise two children here.
Awesome. Well, tell me a little bit more about yourself because you actually serve a couple of different capacities, right? You're a president and a dean of a school there. You'll have to help me out with that. You are also an executive director of the Interfaith Center of Sustainable Development, but you're going to have to unpack that for me. So just tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I directed an organization that I founded called the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development. We reveal the connection between religion and ecology and mobilize people to act. I've taught at a Jewish rabbinical school here on Judaism and ecology. I'm not the president and the dean, and I grew up, as I said, in California. I grew up on an acre of land with an organic garden that I gardened with my mother. I grew up going to a Jewish summer camp near Yosemite, where I was first exposed to the connection between religion and ecology. And I studied about ecological sustainability when I was in college. And when I came here and I studied in yeshivot or Jewish study centers, and I studied the Torah, the Pentateuch, Old Testament, and I also studied the Talmud, which is another Jewish writing that's central to Jewish thinking. I came to realize that Jewish teachings have deep things to say about ecological sustainability. And over the past number of years, I've been working with my co-author, Rabbi Leo D., to publish Eco Bible, which is the first of its kind, an ecological commentary on the Hebrew Bible.
Mm-hmm. And so taking from the Holy Scriptures, text and examples, that's written in there. And I'll have to say, just reading through the Torah, I think for a lot of people, we probably overlook. We we find ourselves early on in the garden, and um, the Lord creating, but then after that, I think probably um, my estimation is maybe an egocentric reading of the Torah, that we begin then to look to um, our relationship, the vertical relationship between ourselves and God. But at least in my own camp, being a Christian, we've never really talked a whole lot about responsibility, man's responsibility and stewarding creation, and what that looks like. So I want to delve into this a little bit. What was it in your life that kind of brought you to the point to realize the immense amount of responsibility that we have, and really brought about a passion for this?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think my soul is attuned to these issues, so it's perhaps going back is really beyond me. I just see myself as a channel for trying to bring in uh, faith-based ecological wisdom. And as I said, because I grew up with a connection to the land, and I studied ecological thinking, when I dug more deeply into Bible texts, I came to realize and to see a layer in them that relates to ecological sustainability. I'll just give you one example. It says in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to serve it and conserve it. Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, of blessed memory, who passed on recently, translated it as to serve it and conserve it. In other words, that we're both meant to serve creation, which also means to protect, to be stewards of creation, and to conserve it, that we're not given license to destroy or degrade creation. A number of verses earlier in the first chapter of Genesis, in verses 26 and 28, it says, God said, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, and conquer it, and dominate the fish and the birds and the animals. And some people think that gives us a carte blanche to destroy God's creation. But there's a rabbinic teaching that God showed Adam the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, see everything that I created for you, and see how praiseworthy it is. Be careful not to destroy or despoil my creation, because if you do, there will be nobody after you to repair it. So that's one example of how God is giving us responsibility for God's creation, and we have to use that responsibility to be stewards and to live in balance with this planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I just imagine Adam in that moment. Here's a man actually was taken from creation, wasn't he? Taken from the dust of the earth and formed into man, and we're all going to return back to creation. I constantly go back to that scene in the garden, and how beautiful it was, how perfect it was, how harmonious and balanced that it was. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what was he stewarding? It was so perfect. When I wonder what needed to be done at that point.
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually, it's a question that the rabbis over the millennia have dealt with as well. What did God mean when God said to serve it and conserve it, or to till and to tend, as is a more common translation? So, according to some understandings, Adam was a farmer, and he was working the land. So when it says in Hebrew la'ovda, to work it or to till it, so he was literally planting and had to hoe it and take away the weeds. So it was work for him. Not everything came as fruit that he could just pick from a tree. And to guard it, as is another translation of the Hebrew lishomra, meant that he had to guard it from wild animals that might have eaten the vegetables that he was growing. That's sort of at a literal level, but as Rabbi Sacks points out, at a deeper level and a level that's more relevant for us today, it means that we need to protect God's creation.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, like, because we know that sin crept in, sin cast a curse upon creation, and changed it quite substantially. Would you regard, like, the events that we see in creation, apart from man's work, such as hurricanes and earthquakes, are those a part of the curse, or is that just something part of the routine or seasonal life of creation?
Well, it's a good question. As you know, it says that the curse to Adam was it says in Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, by the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat until you return to the ground, for from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So as you pointed out, we are taken from the earth. In Hebrew, the word for person is Adam, and the word for earth is Adamah. So a more fitting translation of person would be earthling. We're earth and earthling. Now, and the Torah reminds us that we're ultimately made up of dust, as is the rest of creation. And in fact, in relation to the curse of that he would have to work the land, and it would be, by the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat. Most of the vitality on this planet gets its nourishment from the top 6 inches of topsoil. And even though we operate under the assumption that we're separate from the earth, the verse actually reminds us, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So, in terms of your question about the curse and how does that play out today? Well, I mean, at one level, humanity has undone the curse, and at some level we've returned to the Garden of Eden through our industrial system. Most people are not working as farmers and sweating by the sweat of their brow, plowing the land with their hands. In America, very few people plow the land with a hoe by their hands. Even if someone's a farmer, many of the farmers are using these giant combines. And many people today are eating food that is very available to them. So you go into a supermarket and you can buy food, even cheap food, that in previous times people didn't have that access to cheap food. But on another hand, we are at some level creating a new curse on the earth through our actions, by degrading God's creation, whether that's polluting the rivers, whether that's causing plastic. I'll just tell you a story. I was we went on a vacation for a few days to a beach on the coast here in Israel. And this a few months ago, for the first time in my life, I went into the water and I saw plastic. I couldn't swim without encountering plastic in the water. And according to some scientists, there's going to be more plastic in the oceans than fish in about 20 years. So, God created a beautiful world. God created oceans that didn't have plastic. And for us to put plastic in is to, as I said, to degrade God's creation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've engineered products that didn't exist in creation. And like I guess my platform of nutrition, I talk a lot about nutrition and eating food that wasn't created. Eating food that was created or engineered. I don't want to even say created. It was just engineered by lab techs. They created a color and a texture and a taste. So I teach people we can stay away from those things. And I think it's true too, though it's probably very hard, or much more hard, to stay away from plastics altogether. But what is the things, what are the, I call it the low hanging fruit that we might start doing or should be doing to better steward the earth?
Right. So, I mean, just in relation to what you said about food, so there's a verse in the Bible, in Deuteronomy. It says that you should you should guard yourselves very well, and the rabbis understand that to mean a teaching about being healthy, that we need to guard our health very well. So, in terms of nutrition, my wife is actually a naturopath, and
Awesome. Yeah.
and so she works mostly with women on healthy eating and a spiritual approach to eating. I would say that there's also a lot of teachings in this book, Eco Bible, which I'm, as I said, about our approach to food and to healthy food. For example, the book of Genesis, at the end, Jacob blesses his children and gives them a blessing, and a number of those blessings relate to food. Jacob blesses the tribe of Judah with good wine. He blesses the tribe of Asher with good olive oil. He blesses the tribe of Issachar with good fruits. And so the Bible is describing a local agricultural economy where people are eating food that is grown by their neighbors and that they trade for. It's local, it's fresh, it's seasonal. And Moses repeats the similar blessings at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. So, this topic of nutrition and how do we treat our bodies as a sanctuary, as a temple, as a gift that God has given us. Just like we're stewards of the earth, we're stewards of our bodies. Our bodies are on loan to us from God. We are spiritual beings in our physical bodies, and we have there's a spiritual responsibility to take good care of our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote a book called The Food God. And you see, I'm holding it up. And so just kind of going through about the importance of food and how it relates to our connection to God, because it did in the garden, it was a connection point, but it was also a disconnection point because of our appetite for the things that we don't have liberty to have. And so eating the fruit, casting a curse, and even, and here's where I think, what I have a lot of respect for you, Rabbi, is, yeah, we even see God creating a menu list in a way to eat to identify as people. I'm assuming you're kosher. You eat.
Yes, I do keep kosher.
Yeah. So no matter where you go in the world and no matter what meal you eat, as you're eating that meal, it's a reminder to whom you belong to, right? And what a beautiful thing that is. And then we see in Isaiah, when Isaiah even talks about a day that's going to come, and that the Lord is going to provide the choicest meats and the finest wines. And so it just seems like food has kind of always been on God's mind in its purest form, anyway, for our benefit, for our health. So that may be the low hanging fruit right there. Just kind of begin to look at food as part of creation that we should be stewarding well, so that we can steward our own bodies well.
Yeah, and just in that regard, I'd point out that when God creates the world, God says only a few things to people in the first chapter of Genesis. And at the end of the first chapter, in verse 29, God says to people, "See, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit, they shall be yours for food." And so God tells people to eat a plant-based diet. And then the next verse, God says, "And to all the animals on land, to all the birds of the sky, and to everything that creeps on earth, in which there is the breath of life, I give all the green plants for food." And it was so. And then the next verse, God says that he found everything very good. Well, why was it very good? And this is the only time where God says it was very good. The other days it was just good. So one understanding is that God created a system where life did not take life to sustain life. The lion lay down with the lamb, and people were eating fruits and vegetables and seeds and grains and oils. And that diet, eating a plant-based diet was a healthy diet for people. That's how Adam and Eve thrived. If you compare that to the diet today, where many people are eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner animal products, whether it's meat, dairy, eggs, and that's contributing to an obesity epidemic. It's contributing to different issues of heart disease and other diseases. I think we can take some instruction from here. In fact, the first chief rabbi of pre-state Israel, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cohen Cook, said that this vision that God lays out in the first chapter of Genesis of people and animals eating plants, it's not going to be lost for all time, even though after Noah, God allowed people to eat animals. Rabbi Cook said that we're going to return to that in a future time. He wrote that in 1903. And for many people today, it's possible to eat a plant-based diet, and many people feel healthier and more vital in doing so.
It wrecked me. I'll tell you, I did blood testing. I tried to go vegan for a while just to do an N=1. And that is not how God created me. and then I sequenced my DNA and found out that as well, that my personal design is not plant-based, but maybe in the resurrection.
Okay, well, it's but I also point out that there's an idea of being a reducitarian. Some people will eat like 30 servings of meat a week. They'll eat it at every meal, and sometimes multiple portions of meat at every meal. That and that, as I said, leads a lot of people to health issues.
Mhm.
So even if a person isn't interested in taking on a plant-based diet, there's definitely room to to move closer to that, from where many people are at today.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my take, when I coach people, when we talk about stewarding creation, I still go back to the creation of the human body, and each individual body is created and designed uniquely. And so that's where I get the opportunity to look into DNA and see very specifically what's going on in our genes that determine the best diet suited for a person. And so, but nevertheless, it still goes back to stewarding creation, taking care of what God has given us.
Mhm.
And whether that's the garden, or whether that's the plants in the garden, or the food that goes into our body, or the body that's receiving the food, it's still something that we should be considerate of, I think, at all times. I do have this question: how do you feel about a raw vegetable diet? Is that something that you would prescribe to? Because I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that in the Garden of Eden, it probably was raw vegetables, right?
Yeah, I think that people were probably eating a lot of raw fruit and vegetables, and seeds and nuts. I mean, I personally try to eat as much raw fruits and vegetables as possible. There's actually a naturopath in Florida, Dr. Robert Morse, who calls for such a diet. His point is that the animal that people are most similar to, if you look at our DNA, are monkeys, and monkeys eat mostly fruits. And I personally feel when if I eat a piece of fruit, if I eat a grapefruit, for example, that gives me a level of satiation, even if it's only for an hour or two, and I feel good. I feel vital and thriving. But if I eat, a bunch of processed foods,
Hmm.
a bag of
Game changer.
Cheetos or, whatever it is, it tastes good, but afterward, I feel like I don't have energy.
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt. I can tell, I've been eating clean and whole, to the best of my ability for years now. And what keeps me from going back to a processed meal is how I feel after I eat that processed meal. It's horrible.
Mhm.
So, and something I'm trying to work on my kids with too. It's the hardest thing is to get get kids, but we're working on it. I'd say my kids are probably better off than most. They can read food labels anyway. I've
Uh-huh.
ingrained it into them.
Mhm.
Um, let's go back again. I want to talk a little bit more about just stewarding the environment. Talking about environmental or ecological, and thankfully we have seen a lot of progress in farming technology and in farming practices. Um, but when we look at our ability now to really take care of the earth, what we talked about food, but what should we be doing ecologically now? Kind of the low hanging fruit. What are the most the return on the investment? I guess that ROI. What can I get in return? The most return in practicing this one thing.
Mhm.
A while back, people got fussy over straws. I don't even use a straw. Like, what's the point of using a straw in my cup? It's just excess plastic, and I don't need it.
Mhm.
But it was like people were virtue signaling everyone. Like, God forbid you're demonized if you even use a straw.
Mhm.
But in the grand scheme of things, I think there's probably more important things. I think that's important, but there's probably more important things. Like, what do you see, Rabbi, as far as, hey, we need to tackle this now?
Well, I would say there's a number of things. There's actually a big research study on that question called Project Drawdown, and that listed 100 things, the top 100 things, for us to live more sustainably. As I mentioned, one of them is relating to meat and dairy, because cows uh, and other animals have a big footprint. I mean, you're in North Carolina, which has one of the biggest chicken populations in the United States. I believe there's about 1 billion chickens, if I'm not mistaken, living in North Carolina. And as you know, North Carolina is also the state in the US that is most prone to hurricanes. It receives the most hurricanes of any state. And so when those hurricanes come, they don't, they evacuate the people, they don't evacuate the chickens. So that's, that causes various both ecological problems. It's also an issue of animal treatment, which is something the Bible relates to, because the book of Psalms said God is good to all and God's mercy is upon all of God's works, including chickens. And, but in terms of actual actions, I would say one thing relates to airplane travel. That airplanes are a very effective way of polluting our atmosphere and contributing to climate change. So reducing airplane travel is one thing. I also talk about gold. People don't realize that most of the gold in the world has been already taken from the earth. I grew up learning about the gold rush in California in 1848, 1849, 49ers. And but there's not really many gold nuggets out there in the world left. And so much of the gold mining that takes place today is through a process called cyanide leach mining, where they take a big tractor and it scoops up a huge mound of earth from places they know that there's little gold filings, little pieces of small tailings of gold in the earth. And then they pour this solution of cyanide on it, and that extracts the gold from the dirt. And then they wash away the dirt, and the dirt goes and pollutes downstream communities. And so, even people give gold rings in weddings as an act of holiness, but we got to make sure that our gold is indeed mined in a holy way. So that's the third thing I would say.
Okay, so let's summarize that. Number one would be
It'll be
the
meat.
animal. Yeah, the way that we farm animal industrialized meat product.
Yeah.
Totally agree. It's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And then reducing air travel. Is
Mm-hmm.
that because of the exhaust?
Yeah, because airplanes are the most effective way of depositing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that carbon dioxide will stay in the atmosphere for 100 years and create a blanket over the Earth that will warm our planet.
Okay, gotcha. And then thirdly is the way that is it the way that we mine metals?
Yeah, it's the way we mine metals, although there's so many people living today. There's almost 8 billion people
Right.
that there's just not enough gold and silver and platinum, to mine sustainably for the demand that people have for these metals today.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And all three go back to man's modern lifestyle. And I'm kind of always romanticizing ancestral living. We have a lot of modern amenities that I'm thankful for, but there's still some things that I wish we could go back to. And like definitely the meat, the meat farming, the way that it's done today. Yeah, there's a lot that I would change. I don't want to get off on that tangent, but goodness, there's just a lot of disgusting things there. I'm gonna swing it around this way because, like, for me, Rabbi, I was raised to love the earth. I was raised in the country, a farm boy. That, like, I learned early on these three words were holy: leave no trace. Okay, so when we would go hunting or hiking or camping, it was important that we left nothing behind. We left it undisturbed. If we created a campfire or whatever, when we broke camp, it looked the best that we could get it back to natural. So I'm there with you. I have been raising a garden my entire life, preserving food. Yeah, I mean, that's just me. My wife is an herbalist, and so we forage and we collect and we use plants for medicinals. We make our own medicines and tinctures, um, just a lot of things like that. We see food as medicine, and so I'm giving you that snapshot of who I am. I am an outlier, right? I'm an outlier. I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor, but I'm an outlier because in Christianity, I'm gonna throw us under the bus. We're not talking about creation. We're not giving any. We're not throwing any importance toward conservative, largely conservative conservation issues. But also, I also serve in a location, Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville is not Charlotte, okay? There's a huge difference. Asheville, North Carolina it's the Portland of the South, right? It's very progressive, very liberal, very outward thinking, or I'm not sure what to call it, outward. Not really sure what planet is orbiting sometimes the thinking, but the point that I'm making is there's a lot of creation worship. Okay, so there's these two pendulums, or two sides of the pendulum. One where we're completely ignoring it. I don't think that's right. The other end where we're worshiping creation. And I serve in a pagan area, a place where there's a lot of New Age and paganism. Where do we find the balance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, Pastor, it's an amazing question. And I just first of all want to relate to what you said about leave no trace, because there's a verse in the Bible where in the book of Deuteronomy where Moses says that the Israelite army the soldiers had to carry with them a shovel, because when they had to relieve themselves in wartime in the outdoors, they weren't allowed to just defecate on the ground and leave it there. But it says in the Bible that they had to bring a shovel in order to cover over their excrement so that they wouldn't defile the land. And so that's a direct Bible verse on leave no trace, because even if the Bible talks about an army in war where you're not even allowed to leave uncovered excrement in war, when people are running and it's wartime, then all the more so in our times where we shouldn't have these like huge giant ponds of hog waste that are that the hurricanes also break through, and God knows what pollution goes downstream to the communities there.
Right.
In regards to your second point about your question about this, I would say a couple of things. First of all, I've had the good fortune of meeting hundreds of Christian clergy who care deeply about creation, and a number of them are in Decatur, Georgia, at the Columbia Theological Seminary. I know several at the Wake Forest Divinity School, and there's others, in Tennessee, in South Carolina. There are many Christian clergy who I've met who have even written books on scripture and creation care. So that's the first thing I would say. And my organization actually just mailed about 400 copies of this book to clergy who wanted it. We reached out to thousands of theological school professors and pastors and priests and rabbis, and several hundred requested it.
I'd like to get one of those guys on my show. I want to get a Christian clergy to come on and show us how they're teaching their people, because I think it's very important that the church rise up and really lead the way in this. Because my perspective is, if we're the people of God, I mean, we should be setting the example, right? And being on the forefront. So I'm glad, I'm encouraged that you have met these guys, and so thank you.
You're welcome, and I'd be happy to suggest a few. In regards to your second point about the other side of the spectrum of people who worship the earth as a god, to be honest, I haven't actually encountered that many such people. I think that a more dominant trend in human society today is what Rabbi Sachs points out, is that people worship themselves. There's the iPhone, the iPad. It's all about me and how much pleasure can I bring to myself. And I think that's the dominant idol worship in human society today, is of consumerism
Totally
and of pleasure.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But in regards but there, look, I don't deny that there are pagans and people who worship the earth. Worshiping the earth is not something that that my religious tradition supports. And when we wrote Eco Bible, the idea is we're not worshiping the earth. We're trying to take care of God's creation, because ultimately part of our spiritual work on this planet is caring for the world that God gave us. And if we neglect that spiritual work and we degrade God's creation, we are diminishing our own religion and our own religious practice as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going against God's plan.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think people get confused sometimes between what it means to steward something and what it means to worship something. And we definitely have tree huggers here in North Carolina. We've got people that legit worship energy and the universe and all the creation can throw at it. But it could be said to those of us, like, people have called me a fit freak, or something like that, because I steward physical fitness. Like, I steward my physical health, but my priority is, like you said in the beginning, I'm a spirit. I'm wrapped in flesh. But if that flesh is sick, then how well am I going to be able to operate in this world? So I want to take care of what I'm wrapped in. I want to steward that. That's not worshiping it. It's just taking care of it. The same with finances. I think it's important that we're stewards of finances, yet without worshiping the almighty dollar. And so I think it's always kind of a peculiar balance there. I think where people would, at least in my life, make accusations, but it's something that we just value. I value money. Of course, I value money. It takes care of my family. It pays my bills, and it allows me to invest in ministry and do good for others. And I value my health, and so I want to take care of it. But I certainly value the earth, because it is what God created. And I see that Genesis creation is something that's just gorgeous. It's beautiful. I don't understand it. It's just, I can't even fathom it in my mind. But that's the first thing that God gave us to read. When we open up the Bible or the Torah, in the beginning, God created. And what a beautiful thing that is. And so, particularly, I know we share this, let's take care of the things that God has created. Right. So tell me about the book, the Eco Bible. When did that come out, and what can we find in it? Where can we find that book?
Sure. So I published it about 2 months ago. And just last week, I published a hardcover edition. It's available on many online bookstores like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and iBooks and Kobo. It's also available at bookstores. And if it isn't at a local bookstore, then you can request the bookstore owner to order it, since it's available on Ingram, which is based in Tennessee. And they print on demand and can ship it to any bookstore. The idea behind it is that many people who I meet think that religion is one thing and ecology is another thing, as you were mentioning earlier. And in my experience, this is not the case. There's ecological consciousness is organic to the Bible. And so what we've done is we've put in these 2 volumes. We published volume 1 recently, and we're publishing volume 2 in 2021. We've created about 450 commentaries on the Pentateuch, on the 5 books of Moses. And in this commentary, we draw on the wisdom of hundreds of rabbis over the past 2,000 years. And we also draw on a number of scientists who talk about how what we're doing to the earth and to our local ecosystems is affecting us. What comes around goes around. People think that when they throw away a piece of plastic, it's just gone forever. But little did I realize that actually that plastic would come back to get me when I went swimming into the beach. And it's not even just that. It's that the plastic is breaking down in the oceans through the sunlight, and those microplastics are then ingested by fish. And when people eat fish, that goes into our bodies, going back to our bodies. And then those microplastics are in our bodies, and they impact our endocrine system, and they impact our different functioning. So it's all interconnected. There's a interdependence of all of creation, and this is God's world. And so we need to realize that we essentially can live at different levels of soul awareness. If we live at the lowest level, then we just consume like regular consumers. But as we raise our level of soul awareness, we realize that how I consume impacts me and all other species. It impacts other people, and it impacts the 8 million species that God created. And so therefore, part of spirituality, I believe, is bringing mindfulness into our consumption.
It's funny. I'm sorry. It's not funny. It's ironic though, that as you said, that people's religion is self. Um, and as we destroy the environment, we inadvertently destroy ourselves.
Mhm.
That's irony.
It is ironic, and I think that actually the ecological crisis is a spiritual crisis. It's not about the birds and the bees or the trees and the toads. It's
Mm,
about how we live, as I said, as spiritual beings in a physical reality.
yes.
And part of what this moment is messaging to us, part of what God is messaging to us right now, is that we need to raise our level of spiritual awareness to care for others. Uh, Spirituality is also about giving, about being altruistic, about being net givers instead of net takers. And the more that we care for other people and other species, I think the more we'll serve God in a true and pure way.
Yeah, for sure. When I'm in nature, I just adore nature, and planting a garden and harvesting. To me, that is a spiritual connection. Not spiritual to the earth, but in the earth, being spiritual, connecting to the Lord. This closeness with Him, the things that He has created, and the beauty of that, and the design. Right, I love the design. Like He put forth effort to design this ecosystem to work as a system. It's engineered, and there's something about it to me, whether I'm hiking or gardening, got my hands in the dirt. I just feel that closeness. Would you say that across the human condition, that is certainly relatable, that people just have a connection to God through His creation?
I think definitely. I personally encounter God, when I go out into the world, into nature. And as you said, it's not about worshiping nature. It's about that God has created this amazing world, this beautiful world, just to look at the sunset and to admire the colors, to go into a forest. Yesterday on this hike with my son, we went into this valley where there were no people, and I saw this olive tree that was maybe 1,000 years old, this giant olive tree. And it's just like, wow, he got like, and I grew up in California with the oldest trees in the world, the coast redwoods and the giant sequoia, which just about a month ago, many thousands of those trees burned down in the worst fires in California in a long time. So, this should give us pause. The rabbis taught that the life of the human being depends on the tree, based on a verse in Deuteronomy chapter 19. And so therefore, what happens in nature is also it's gonna portend what will happen to us.
Mm, wow. I need to. What you've done is given me a reminder to go back and read scriptures with a fresh lens. Thank you for that, because you're bringing up verses, and I'm like, I don't remember that. It's
Yes.
easy to overlook.
And I also think that, looking at scripture from an ecological lens can help to renew people's connection to the Bible. A lot of young
Exactly.
people today are more concerned about the future of our earth than they are about scripture.
Mm,
And for those young people, I imagine in Asheville that's the case for a number of young people. For those people to say that the Bible has something meaningful to say about ecological sustainability is a way of engaging them on with the Bible. Because if for many young people, if a clergy member comes at them with standard Bible teachings, they don't want to hear it. It doesn't speak to their heart for one reason or another. But to say that the Bible talks about climate change, that the Bible talks about sustainable farming, that the Bible talks about being healthy, these are things that I think a lot of young people can relate to.
for sure. For sure. And it may give them a new, like you said, a new appreciation for scripture, and hopefully so. Well, you've challenged me. You've definitely given me um, uh, just a new sense of, I want to get back and reread it, and pick out all of those verses and see it fresh and anew. So thank you for doing that. And I want to thank you for the work and the effort that you're doing, because even more so today, I think it. we've been around the curse. The curse has been around for what, 3,500 years, and it's only getting worse. We see such tremendous effects taking place in the ecosystem due to human error and lack of responsibility, lack of stewarding. I just appreciate your work and continuing to educate people, especially even like myself. And I can get this out on a podcast platform and share with other people. But the book as well, I'd love to get a copy. I can't wait. So you say it's on Amazon, or can order it from my local bookstore, which we have a great one. I can do that in. And it's called the Eco Bible, correct?
That's right, Eco Bible. And I appreciate your speaking with me. Just the fact that that we're talking together is a step forward in terms of for hopefully for all humanity. And in terms of what you mentioned about the curse, it says in Deuteronomy, I present before you blessing and curse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really our choice. God gives us the ability to choose, and that's what this moment is all about. One of my teachers, Rabbi Sutton, said that we're living in times that our ancestors have been dreaming about for thousands of years. Everything hangs in the balance. And the question is, are we going to choose the blessing? God's blessing is so tremendous. There's all the abundance that God is showering on us. But in order to live with that blessing for the long term, we need to live sustainably. And so that's why in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses keeps repeating about the long term, thinking about the long term. And the rabbis say, who is wise? The person who sees the long-term effect of their actions. And that's really the spiritual and the religious message, I think, for our time, is to step up to this challenge and to live with God and with each other in a more sustainable way.
That's good. That's such good perspective. They say the best day to plant an oak tree is 50 years ago, but the second best day is today. I may not get to enjoy right now the effort that I put in, but there's other generations that will get to enjoy it. And we shouldn't think solely just upon our short days, but think long term. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Definitely.
Where else could we find you if my audience wanted to find more information out about you, the work that you're doing? Is there other platforms that we can find you on?
Sure. So my organization's website is interfaithsustain.com. We also have the largest YouTube channel on religion and ecology, 270 videos, including many videos of Christian priests and pastors speaking on ecological sustainability. That's on the YouTube channel of the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development. And we also have an active Facebook page and Pinterest and Twitter.
Awesome. I'll put these in the show notes and then direct people over to those places.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Is there anything, as we're going to wrap up, I know you are probably got a lot going on there today, or your day may be winding down. What time is it in Jerusalem right now?
It's about 6 o'clock here.
Oh, okay. Okay. So maybe dinner time. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with? Words of encouragement, instruction, or any other information that you think would be pertinent?
Sure. I'll just leave you with a short story that the Nobel laureate Toni Morrison told of a young boy that comes to an old woman with a bird in his hands. And he says to the woman, "Can you tell me whether the bird in your hands is alive or dead?" And the old woman thinks to herself, and she realizes that the boy is playing a trick on her, because if she says the bird is dead, the boy will release his hands and the bird will fly away. And if she says the bird is alive, the boy will close his hands and crush the bird, and he's got her coming and going. Either way, she's going to be wrong. So she thinks to herself for a minute, and she says to the boy, "I don't know whether the bird in your hands is alive or dead. All I know is that the fate of the bird is in your hands." And I think that's the case for our situation today, that God has given us tremendous responsibility as the human being, the ability to change creation. And at the same time, God is trusting in us to be stewards of creation, to take care of it, to take care of our own bodies, to treat them in a holy way, and to treat the land, the earth, and all the species on it in with respect, and to live in balance on this planet.
That's so good, man. That's a good one. That's wise words. Thank you, Rabbi, for that. Well, it's been wonderful having you on the show, and I just pray blessings on you, and just can't wait to see Volume 2 when it comes out. I'm sure that'll be great work. I want to thank all of you listeners for tuning in and joining us today on this episode for the Fit for the Kingdom podcast, so that we can all just partner together. And it really is a partnership, isn't it? We're all in this together. And so hopefully you've received some encouragement from our rabbi today, and pick up his book, Eco Bible, Yonatan Neril, and check it out for yourself. Go to your local bookstore, get it on Amazon, however you need to get that book in your hands, and just see how that you can deepen your spiritual connection with our Creator through stewarding His creation. If you haven't yet, go over to iTunes, leave a good rating and review over there. I appreciate that. It helps us to be findable or searchable, findable, whatever, online, and share with your friends and family and let them receive some of the encouragement today. So we thank you for tuning in. And with that, we're going to say goodbye. Rabbi, it was wonderful having you today, and blessings to you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Holbert. Blessings to you and everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I just paused it.